once again to another One Thing. I'm your host, as always, Neil Bauer, joined by the lovely and wonderful and fabulous Kim and Jody from ePayments, a fresh approach to payments. This one, we actually have a very special guest, somebody we've been actually talking to since the start of the podcast, finally able to bring them in. Kim, do you want to do the introductions?
I would love to. Scott Burnett, otherwise known as the Shark. He's a nationally recognized speaker and best-selling author. He teaches and shares business and tax education with audiences all over the country. He's spoken to thousands of groups and associations about how to properly reduce taxes and protect your assets. Scott is the former deputy district attorney for Santa Barbara County in California. He's a trailblazing attorney and surfer, and we are lucky enough to call him a friend. So with that, Scott, we are so thrilled to have you on the show finally. Can you tell us what you're working on these days and what gets you excited right now?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk with the group. Appreciate it. Well, my business is my passion. So everything that I do pretty much on a day-to-day basis is communicating with business owners. So like today is a great example. My calendar, I have 7 calls. And some of them are people that are on different places in their journey in their business life. Some are starting out. Some have been doing it for a while. Some of the calls are related to year-end planning. So what I'm working on right now is just really the plethora of contacts that we have, that people are asking questions about stuff that really our system of education doesn't really provide much. I mean, I don't know, if you went to high school, you may have taken an economics class, but you didn't know anything about running a business. And even in law school, they don't teach you how to run a business. So a lot of what I'm trying to do is just kind of fill in the blanks with helping people understand what they need to know, what they should know, or kind of better stated is, you don't know what you don't know. So I'm trying to fill in the gaps of what you don't know.
Love that. Do you feel like since the pandemic now, people are being creative and thinking outside the box? Do you have more people coming to you about maybe starting their own venture?
Yeah, I always read books about, mindset, and, you want to kind of create the situation as if you had created it. Whatever situation you're in, your mindset should be like, I had created this situation. So the pandemic was a curveball for everybody, right? And so some people lost their jobs or realized how vulnerable they are in the job market. So we have had really an influx of people contemplating new business ventures, but we've always had that. Network marketing is real popular, and a lot of people that are stay-at-home workers, with families, are transitioning as a part-time business owner. So there's always challenges getting started and trying to broach that gap. But yeah, I would say there's been an influx for sure.
I'm curious, Scott. This isn't my one thing, but we can go there. What do you think is the one thing people are least prepared for when they start their venture and getting going?
I'm going to be honest with you. Everybody's capable. That is never a question in my mind, because if you're doing something, typically you have some passion for it. So you have the requisite energy to create something positive from it. On the other side of the equation is fear. And, I kind of use these jokes like, fear, FEAR, false evidence appearing real. And you kind of create a story. And so the story typically is that it's not going to work, or I'm not going to make it, or I'll fail, or I'm not sure if this is a good idea or not. And so I was reading an article this morning about self-sabotage. Like people just they have an opportunity and they start to undermine that opportunity. So what's the one thing that I see a lot is that people are held back, not by the economy or by the system or by anything, but really they're held back by their limiting beliefs about their ability to make this work. And I have never met anybody, well, I shouldn't say that. I'm sure I've met a few people that shouldn't be in business by themselves. But for the most part, I think most people can do it, and they just need to kind of, just get started. You learn through the process. You don't learn in the preparation.
Learning through the process. It's terrifying to change and try something new, but if you know that you're going to be the master of your own success by your willingness to learn and stick with it. Had a conversation just about this, about grit. Like, we do not train students with grit. So they immediately turn to that sabotage engine.
Yeah, Angela Duckworth wrote a great book called Grit, and it's just about perseverance. And it's really what, I think sometimes business owners come into it with an illusion of freedom. I'll have more free time. I'll be able to do more with my family. And all of those things are true, but you work for the company. You don't get to come and go. I mean, if you want it to be successful, you show up on time. You stay to the end time. You focus on the details. That's the grind. And what you're trying to find is the passion about the grind, because that's always going to be there. And you could either say it sucks and then it becomes hard to do every day, or it is what it is, and I'm going to find the positive out of it. I'm going to kind of create from that template.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I think that is a big misconception when you go into business, is just the amount of grit it takes, and also failure. Like, you are going to fail over and over and over again before you get it right. And people, I know I wasn't personally prepared for that, that level.
Yeah. I don't like to candy coat stuff. I don't like to tell people it's going to be easy. There is a grind, but I don't want people, because when we said before, it was like, well, what's the thing that's holding people back? Fear of failure. Right. And now we're saying, well, it's going to be a grind. Well, gosh, how am I going? Yes, it's a grind, but it's a grind going to work every day. It's a grind to work for a boss who sucks. Ask my staff and they'll tell you.
Not true.
Yeah, but it's called work for a reason. Now, when you work out at a gym, that's hard, but you're thinking about the result. And that's the same with this. It's work. It's a bit of a task, but the result, the focus is always, where am I going, not where I am, when it comes to business anyway.
Right.
We had Michael Karasman on. He's been an entrepreneur his whole life. And he goes, one thing about people who want to be an entrepreneur is like, why do you want to be an entrepreneur? Because I don't want to work. I want to work for myself. I don't want to have a boss. And he's like, well, if you're an entrepreneur, you have like 50 bosses.
You're working for everybody.
Yeah.
But the thing in that expression, the heavy is the head that wears the crown. Right. Mm-hmm. So when you're your own business owner, you get to make the decisions, but you're also responsible for every decision. And there isn't anybody a lot of times to bounce stuff off of. And that's kind of what my business has kind of evolved into, is sort of this, I'm trying to teach people the potholes that, frankly, I fell into when I was starting out in my business. I always tell this story about, like, in law school, they teach us how to sue businesses, but they don't teach you how to run them. And so when I got out there, I learned everything the hard way. If there was a hard lesson to learn, I swear to God, I learned it. And
me too.
Yeah.
No, Jody and I always say, oh, you know what? We can really consult you on this, because we always learn things the most painful way. But guess what? It's burned into your brain at that point. You learn the lesson and how to come back quick from it.
Right. And so, like, when I got out of law school, I got audited. I had been in my legal practice for a few years, and I got audited, and I went to my CPA every year, and I gave them information, and I didn't do anything nefarious. My returns were filed. Everything looked right. But when the auditor came in, the stuff that I thought was deductible that my CPA knew about wasn't deductible. And I got really beat up in that audit, like to the tune of about $60,000. And so, you don't have that sitting there in your back pocket. So you get on a payment plan with them, and it's kind of a long story. But what ended up happening is, like, well, my CPA and I are not communicating the way we think we are, or the way I think we are. They're not telling me I'm doing something wrong. They're just accounting for the money that I spent. They're not evaluating it or telling me, well, you need to substantiate this or that. So in the audit, it was like an old-fashioned trip to the woodshed. I just got it handed to me. And so really what ended up happening is that changed the game for me. That changed my life, because I said, well, if this is happening to me, this is happening to everybody. And so what that really kind of was how Burnett and Associates sort of began. So now, like the evolution of it, now I write books about taxes. I'm approved by the IRS to provide the education to tax preparers. And really, you start to see the full thing is like, you don't need to learn the tax code. You need to learn about a dozen things. And then once you know those things, it's pretty easy after that.
Can I jump in? Because I'm really excited. You've got a lot of sports paraphernalia behind you. Not sure if you're aware, but those guys used to be basketball players and pretty good ones at that. So we are working with, what my company works with, more than baseball. And it's basically helping minor leaguers who get paid absolutely nothing. And especially with the pandemic, their season was cut. They got paid nothing. But it's helping minor leaguers find a path during the minors, getting them paid fairly and equitably, but also finding them housing, getting them equipment. But the big thing is offering them life beyond baseball. So if they're moving outside, like, hey, I'm not going to make it next year, what is my path outside of it? And they're working on plans for starting their own business or getting them involved with some company. It looks like you have a lot. You're a surfer. It says you are an athlete as well in your bio. So
I like to think I used to be. Okay.
You surfed. You're a far greater athlete than I would ever be. So what's great is that you have some experience in space with people. Like, I'm going to ask your experience. What's the one thing you would tell somebody who is an athlete, who is looking to pivot from being in a physically and mentally taxing activity into pivoting into another more mentally, if not physically taxing activity?
Yeah, I think the next step of anybody's career, right? Because you go, my mom always said, you live a lot of lives in a lifetime. And God, that is so true. So you have this athletic life, this academic athletic life that you have cultivated since you were a child and your parents have groomed you for. And then at the expiration of that, your career is coming to some sort of finality athletically. So where do you go? What I see a lot of times, they'll go to coaching or different things, but the advice I always give people with respect to this is the same advice that I'll probably give my son when he's old enough to hear it, but find something that you love. And I know that sounds really trite, and it is, but without passion, you can't do something and really make a go of it or make a career out of it. If without passion, nothing's going to get you out of bed. And you got to get out of bed. You got to grind into it. Like we talked about, Jody, the grind, right? And we've got to feel good about what we're doing. And so coaching is what I see typically they get into. And then they learn their business acumen through that process. But it could be anything. I see finance. I see collectibles. I see sports people go into insurance. You just have to find something that, I think, this is my opinion, you have to be passionate about it, that not every day you're going to jump out of bed excited, but it's something that you feel good about. And if it can help people, which is kind of what is my why, is I like to teach and I like to help. That's what keeps me going in it. So find the passion, whatever it is.
I love that.
I do too.
Protecting your assets. You talk a lot about protecting your assets, and I'm curious, what's the one thing that people can do to protect their assets physically? But also, I know you've been on a spiritual journey yourself. What can they do with that most important asset themselves to protect themselves, as they move on this path? So twofold.
Yeah, so we're going to cover a lot of ground.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about asset protection. What's the one thing that comes up a lot is people get sued and they weren't expecting to get sued. And that's when the problems start. The United States has 5% of the world's population. We have 74% of the world's lawyers, and we generate 94% of the entire world's litigation. So our legal system is very robust, right? We have more law students in law school than practicing attorneys right now.
Wow.
And the Census Bureau is saying it's estimated by 2024, I believe, that lawyers are going to outnumber human beings. So it's just getting worse for you guys every day.
Gee.
So really what asset protection is it's like doors and windows in your house. You close your door, not because you're concerned, but because for privacy. You close your curtains, you make things sure they're shut so that somebody can't come in. Asset protection is similar. You have homes, you have businesses, you have portfolios, you have things that you've created, you've built in a lifetime. And in a legal system that is kind of running amok a little bit, particularly right in the last few years, I've seen it even worse than I've ever seen it in my career. It's not a question of if you get sued, it's more of a question of when. Mm-hmm. And what happens is that once the lawsuit begins, there's a set of laws called fraudulent conveyance, and you're not allowed really to protect yourself once you get sued. So you have to kind of do your planning before you have a problem. And that's usually when people are not thinking that they need to do any planning because there's no reason to, there's nothing on the radar. So asset protection really is the preservation of assets while your legal seas are calm is really when you should be thinking about it. And there's, houses, portfolios, everything's got a little bit of a different spin. The goal is always to make sure that whatever you're doing is not harming you from a tax perspective. So we have asset protection and we have a proper balance from a tax perspective, usually tax neutrality, meaning it's not costing us more to do it. It's the same or better than what we had before.
Yeah. Well, so, okay. And with that being said, Scott, you don't imagine a lawyer, people always have these, I know there's a lot of anecdotes about, lawyers, and not all of them are favorable, but everybody wants to have a good one. Right.
Right.
And many of them are. When I know that you completed the Deepak Chopra school for business, and I was looking up some of the information on that, and I saw that he's been speaking at Columbia University and working with MBA students, and everybody's kind of searching for that. Like, yes, you want to have all of these things in line from a legal perspective and a tax perspective. But what was it about this particular program and where you are in life that you decided I need to add this component to my business? What prompted that, and how do you think it's helped you and changed your business?
So for me, I run into like reoccurring thought patterns. Like we were talking a little bit about like how you have to sort of accept the situation as it is, as opposed to, creating a story about I'm the victim of this or why is this happening to me, blah, blah, blah. Because that sort of thought process was my pattern. Everything that happened to me. And I was a victim of those circumstances. So as I communicate with clients, a lot of times everybody has similar stories. And we're our own worst critics. Oh my gosh. Could we be any more negative about who we are on our journey? We are so unforgiving of our mistakes. We relive them constantly. And then we're always going back and forth. We're either back here, revisiting some screw up that we made that nobody cares about anymore, or we're in the future about a discussion or an event that may or may never happen. And so the key with all of that is we're not here. We're not present. Because when you are present, you realize there's no fire. The house isn't burning down. Nothing's really happening. In my mind, I'm creating a story. And that's all this is. So I gravitated to it really as a self-help thing. Now, what do I see? I see more people embracing it. I mean, all you have to do is look at the news now, and it is angry and it is pissed off. If it's not one side, it's the other side being mad at the others. There's no civil discourse. There's just everybody's angry at each other. But within that, again, the silver lining in that is that people are starting to see that this is a pattern of behavior, and it's not a good pattern. It's a self-destructive pattern. So for me, the classes, or what we call the mindful business owner, is taking this information and this education, but also trying to center to kind of be the best version of you. If you're present, then you can be calm in the office and not bark at everybody. You can leave the office and leave everything and go home and be present with your family and your wife and your children, or your husband and your children. And I don't know, it's made a huge difference in my life. You know, the best part about it is that it's okay to shut it off. You know, as a business owner, I think sometimes we just keep going and we keep going, and then we go home and kick the dog. And we're, you know, and unfortunately, the dog isn't just the dog. The dog is the kids. The dog is the spouse. The dog is the neighbors. And your ego is justifying that behavior because you had a bad day. And that is the most narcissistic shit that you can create, but we do it all the time. And that's kind of, am I allowed to say shit, Neil? Can I talk shit?
Shit all day long.
But, you know, and that's kind of what it is. So I'm sorry. I as you can see, I get paid by the hour. I talk a lot. The journey was for me. And that I also learned too in my career that if you want to really know something, learn to teach it. And that's where you really start to find the finer points of it. So that's kind of what got me into it.
Well, speaking on teaching, where can people go to learn? You say you have a masterclass.
Yeah.
Where can people go? Where can people go to learn or just sign up for this masterclass?
Well, it's just being a client with us. It comes up. I offer services to clients, whether it's, you know, corporate compliance in terms of record keeping, minutes and resolutions or formations, all the stuff that we do. But we offer free consultations to people, and it just sort of comes up in their journey. You know this, and we all know it. People are ready when they're ready. And they're not ready when you want them to be ready. They have to come to
amen.
So you could have a great conversation, but they're not ready to hear that message at that time. So we just sort of leave it open. You know, the practice is meditation. You know, it's not a secret. What you're doing is you're calming your mind and you're creating a gap between thoughts. So if you kind of just stop for a second and just started, you know, paying attention to what's going on, your mind is having this amazing amount of conversations constantly. And what you're trying to do is create a gap in that conversation. And that gap is you. That's who you are. That's the real you, not the conversation, but the gap between the conversation. And when we create that, we can actually bump into who we really are, our authentic self. But more importantly, that gap allows you to create control, self-control, as opposed to reacting. Now you're responding. And that response typically is peaceful or calmer than the reaction would have been. Because if I'm always a victim, I'm going to react as a victim. If I'm in the gap, something's happening and I'm evaluating it and I'm understanding it. And meditation is what has brought that bit of clarity for me. I think it works. Everybody that I've introduced it to has changed their life. It's not something that you can consistently do. So if you've started it in the past and it wasn't successful, then just restart it.
I love that, because there was a comment it was Nessa actually that was on last week, and she said a lot of times you're not upset at the circumstances. You're upset at your response to the circumstances. So it goes back to even what Deepak says, which is spirituality is really just self-awareness. You know,
how many times have you lost your temper and regretted losing your temper?
Oh, yeah. Or said something, or were too quick to respond, when if you would have just sat for a minute, it might have taken care of itself, or you might have calmed down for a minute to see where you are and why you're responding the way that you are.
Well, you see, I mean, all of this stuff now is, you know, because we have fight or flight built into us. And, you know, we all know what that is. If like there's something happening, you know, your adrenaline's going up, you're prepared to either run away or hide or fight. And so that mechanism, and is an eternal mechanism, it happens without any sort of control of your body. But while that benefited cavemen hiding from saber-toothed tigers, in our world, social media, the pressures of things, the things that our ancestors never had to deal with, create that anxiety. And you're on a cycle of it 24/7. Okay, so I'm a little bit on a rant here, so forgive me.
No, but I love it. This is so good.
You went off on
Good
it.
rant.
Okay, so you're thinking thoughts, and obviously there's nobody around you. You're just creating these thoughts within yourself. And that means they must be authentic. They must be real. They must be true, because there's no other influence outside of you that's creating that thought. So in your mind, this is authentic, real. This is the reality. And it's not. It's just your version of the reality through your past conditioning of the events that shaped your life. We are the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves that we believe. So we have created this whole thing. Over the last few years, in middle school, for where my sons go to school, 2 kids committed suicide. Young men that 12 years old. I've never heard of anything like that.
I know.
And the story that they tell themselves, it's like you read their notes and stuff, and it's like, I can't live with myself any longer, or I can't live with it any longer. Who you can't live with?
Yeah.
It's just your thoughts. So meditation, all of this stuff, self-awareness, it's just creating the recognition that these thoughts, they're not you. You're not the thought. You're the thinker of the thought. And if you don't get control of the thoughts, then the thoughts become who you think you are, but it's not you. So, kind of relating it back to business, if I have a passion about a business, but my thoughts are telling me I'm going to fail, that's what we have to fix. That's where mindfulness comes in, because this is the easy part.
Yeah.
We can create that. You can learn that, but this is really what needs to be fixed. And it's just you talking to you in a way that you would never talk to anybody else.
Oh God, we always say that. If you said half the things you tell yourself, you wouldn't have any friends. Like you would never say that to a friend or someone you're trying to help, the things that we say to ourselves.
Yeah, like, you're getting ready. God, you look like shit this morning. Would you say that to anybody? Right? But you're having that dialogue with yourself. And for some people, that dialogue is negative 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And it's brutal. And I've worked with a lot of clients that have very bad past experiences, terrible things that have happened to them. And that is their conditioning that they have to overcome. You have to realize that was then, but none of that has to affect today. But, we kind of drift back into it because it's our response mechanism to events. And we're constantly trying to protect our heart, which is the most ironic thing. We're trying to protect it. And then so we start to create a persona that isn't even us, because the authentic you, the real you, doesn't have to protect anything because you have nothing to fear. Nobody can harm you. Your thoughts are the thing that are harming you.
Wow. That was good.
If you're not comfortable with who you are, if you don't love you, and I mean authentically, accept all the blemishes, all the mistakes, all the bullshit that you've done in your life, and accept you as you are, right? Then you can't really brand. Branding is something like, it's almost phony, like, I'm branding me. Well, are you branding this you, the bullshit you, or are you branding the authentic you that everybody actually would like?
Wow.
And everybody goes with the persona that they've created that protects their heart. This person will be nice. This person will talk to you. This person will do everything, but they won't let you in here because they're afraid that if they let you in here, you'll hurt them. So this front keeps them protected, but nobody, you brand around that front. That's not a successful business model. People want authenticity. They want to know who you really are. It's hard to share that if you don't feel safe.
I love it.
So good.
Just like Gandhi, be the change you want to see.
Yes.
Thank you so
Thank you for being on.
Namaste.